afternoon. I'm Martha Minow, and I'm Vice Chair of the Legal Services Corporation, and I have the unlucky task of following some tremendously great speakers. One of the words that I heard Paulette Brown use is "we." It's also a word that we heard from the Secretary of the Army. The recognition that the issues that bring us here today are issues that bring us together, that don't divide us, is going to be the theme of my 1-minute opening remarks, which is that it's originally the "we" was bipartisan. The creation of the Legal Services Corporation was bipartisan. Today, it's not just that, it's the "we" of all the sectors of society, and that includes business as well as law. That includes the wealthy as well as the poor. That includes people in the South as well as people in the North, et cetera, et cetera. So Harriet Miers, White House counsel to President George W. Bush, recently recognized by the Dallas Bar as an exemplar for the profession, she said this: "Lawyers especially have an obligation to give back to society, to defend the rule of law, to work to improve our legal system, and to take steps to ensure that all of our citizens, including the most vulnerable among us, have access to the justice system." A year ago, Chief Judge Merrick Garland said at our meeting right here in the White House, "The legitimacy of the rule of law depends on equal justice. Equal justice depends on equal access, and so in the end, the rule of law depends on the thousands of men and women who do the extraordinarily difficult work of provision of legal services to those in need." I invite everyone here to recognize everyone here who does anything for legal services. And specifically here, I am so honored to be with people who have, I think, the busiest lives on the planet, and they have made the time to be here. That speaks volumes about who's the "we." And we really have no time together, but I'm going to actually ask everyone 2 questions, and I'm going to give a warm call, not a cold call, to my friend Ken Frazier. You're going to be the first one up. And I will introduce each person as I move up and down the line. They're really 2 questions, and you can answer either of them or neither of them. And the questions are, why does this matter to you personally, to business, to America? Why does legal services matter? And the second is, what lessons can business offer legal services? How can we do what we do better? Ken Frazier, just so you know who you are, but I get to say who you are. So Ken Frazier is the remarkable chair and CEO of Merck. He is himself one of the most outstanding public servants serving right now in the President's Export Council, involved in the ABA, the ALI, Cornerstone Christian Academy, NLADA, where he was chair and exemplar, pro bono. And let me just say, your willingness to be the new co-chair of the council that John Levy described just speaks, again, volumes about you and your outstanding words at the Legal Services 40th. So now I hope that's enough of a time for you to figure out what you're going to say.
Thank you, Dean Minow. It's great to be here, and I want to thank the President for making this forum available to us. So I'll start by saying why access to legal services is important. Our business, of course, is the healthcare business. And like healthcare, law is an issue that doesn't matter unless people have access to it. It's critical for people to have access. It's the central issue as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it's the threshold issue that allows people to have access to health care and other public benefits. So it's critical for us to recognize that access is important. As a business, I think we have a huge stake in social cohesion. And if people begin to feel that they don't have a stake in our society, if they believe that the rules that of engagement in the American society, the things that we were taught in grammar school about America no longer apply, then you worry about the center not holding. We see extremes of income inequality in our country nowadays, and it's critical, it's growing worse, and I think we have to recognize that of all the institutions, it is the lawyers who actually are best positioned to address some of those issues. We can't ask Congress to enact legislation to do anything about it. Our Supreme Court, I think it's sad to say, has not really been particularly responsive to the issues that people deal with in their day-to-day lives, how they work, how they interact with each other, the services that they need. So it's critical for those of us who are involved with legal services to make sure that we provide the kind of access to justice that will be important. Without it, I think there will be a lack of trust, and those of us who run business know that the most precious asset that we have on our balance sheet is the public trust.
Wow, excellent. Amy Schulman will be next, and Amy is CEO of Arisa Therapeutics and Lindra. She's a partner in Polaris, which is a healthcare venture investment. She was the path-breaking vice president and general counsel of Pfizer, where she actually transformed how companies relate to outside counsel, and head of the consumer health business there. She teaches at Harvard Business School. She teaches at Harvard Law School. She's a vibrant leader. She's passionate about service, and she's my friend.
Thank you. And I love the way you do the cold calls. It's like being back in school. And I think we should all say, Martha, that, many of us are here today because of you. And your commitment to this, evinced through both your leadership at Harvard Law School and elsewhere, is profound. And I think our entire profession owes a huge debt of gratitude for your leadership on this. So, thank you. I think Ken said it exactly right. Corporations tend to believe that the rule of law is what anchors the public trust in us, and that without trust, we have no real ability to get done as corporate actors and citizens what we want. And so this morning, when I was kind of having an argument, as I do, that's what passes for conversation in a household of mine with one lawyer husband and 3 sons, about kind of why do corporations care? The question of if corporations ultimately care because it's in our self-interest. Is that actually good enough for caring, right? And does that really evince a deep commitment to the rights of poor people and to serving justice? And of course, I went from Pfizer to a company that has all of 7 employees now, where I'm the CEO of a tiny startup in Cambridge. And I think at Pfizer, we had a deep commitment for many of the reasons Ken said, and I had a personal commitment as the general counsel, not just, I'm looking at David, where we always supported Equal Justice Works and fellows and through our law firms, but the number of people who would come up to me and say, look, I'm really busy. Can you just tell me how I can get out of jury duty? And I would say, as the general counsel, actually not. Because one of the most important things that any of us can do as citizens is to serve on juries. And when we're trying cases, we want people just like you sitting on our juries. And access is, and so I'm not often very sanctimonious as a lawyer, but I got on my soapbox about that, and I started to think about that today. Because I do think ultimately it isn't just about corporations getting a level playing field because people trust the system, and if people have access, then they trust the system. I mean, I think that's true, but somehow that doesn't feel completely satisfying enough for me. And ultimately, I think we should all care about this because it's the right thing. Because, as our ABA president said, it's kind of the daily grind and the indignities, right? And everybody deserves access to a life that isn't made harder because we're depriving people of access to justice and basic necessities. The kind of crime of not only can you not get to work to pay the things that are due, but now you actually are getting more fines because you're driving without a license that's been suspended. And I think as human beings, and ultimately corporations are just aggregations of human beings, we should care because we belong to the same world. And I'm really pleased to have been here today, and thank you.
Thank you. David Rubenstein is next, one of the world's most outstanding civic leaders, philanthropist, founder of the Carlyle Group, a leader of the World Economic Forum, Library of Congress, Kennedy Center of the Arts, Harvard University, outstanding speaker at our 40th anniversary for the Legal Services Corporation. David, I so admire your deep knowledge about and reverence for American history and its values, and I thank you for being in correspondence with my 90-year-old dad, who really enjoys it.
He writes the best emails. He sends me emails. He reads the papers all the time and sends me things. He's very impressive. So I imagine what he was like when he was 45, 90. Thank you for being here, inviting me to be here. Some of you may be wondering why it takes 7 business people to convince you that we care about this subject. It's not that they rounded up all 7 business people who care about this subject in the United States, but The Da Vinci Code for why we're here is really this. John Levy's father was the president of the University of Chicago and also the former dean of the law school. John was raised and went to lab school, and he sprinkled in here 3 University of Chicago trustees. So John and Debbie and myself, and also you were raised in Chicago as well. We've had diversity for a few others here, diversity for us, but really it's hidden that the University of Chicago is the leading place that cares about this issue, so everybody should know about that. Recently, I had the good fortune to go to the Supreme Court, and all of you have probably been to the United States Supreme Court, and Justice Roberts was giving me a little tour of the place and explaining some things. And he asked me, do you know where equal justice under the law, which is on the Supreme Court, comes from? I figured, I thought I knew a lot about legal documents. I'd say, did it come from the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights? He said, no, it actually came from the architect of the building. The architect was looking for something to put up there, and he kind of said, how about equal justice under the law? And he asked some of the justices, and they said, that sounds okay. So the truth is, equal justice under the law is what we haven't had. And for most of our history, we haven't had it, and we still don't have it. The truth is, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and Declaration of Independence were written by people who really didn't care about people who didn't have wealth. And now we've migrated our society a bit to care more about people who don't have wealth, but we still are a long way away from that. The business community in the United States, I think, has more sensitivity to this issue than the business community in other countries, but we still are a long way away from what the legal profession has tried to do. The business community, and I think business leaders, haven't gotten a good reputation in our most recent presidential campaign, and I suspect those of us in the business community will have to atone for many of the sins that others in the business community have committed in this campaign in terms of our image. But I do think that the business community cares about this issue for a couple of reasons. One, business people are humans as well. We're not just ogres who care about profit, and we care about living in a society where people have equal justice under the law and where everybody is treated fairly. And just because you have abandoned the practice of law, as I did because I wasn't good at it, and you've gone into the business world, doesn't mean you don't care about the same values you had when you were a lawyer or when you're in law school or when you were a student. So the business community, I think, can do a better job in the United States than it's done. But I think people in this audience, other people who might be listening to us, should recognize that business people don't abandon their concerns about social justice and equal justice in the law because they do worry about profits and losses and so forth. And we also worry in the business community that you cannot have a stable business community and you cannot have a good economic environment if you have you don't have the rule of law, you have a social unrest. And to the extent that the people have a concern about income inequality and lack of justice for people who have lower means, economic means, or the veterans and so forth, you're not going to have a stable society, you're not going to have a good economic community, and you're not going to be the envy of the world. Today, the United States, in many areas, is the envy of the world, particularly in many areas of our justice system, but not in all areas. And one of the ones we trail behind other countries that we should emulate is equal justice under law. And so to the extent that the business community can be motivated to recognize that we have a long way to go and that all of us have to do more to get our society to care about the people who don't have access to justice, we'll be a better society, and that's why I care about it, and that's why I think the others here care about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, John Rogers, we are going to have another Chicago connection here. Thank you for being here. One of the most outstanding investors. You are profiled in a book called The 99 Greatest Investors. You are a trustee of the University of Chicago and also honored by your alma mater, Princeton, with its highest award for an alum. Founder of Ariel Investments, civic leader in Chicago and nationally. John Rogers is also an advocate for financial literacy, which frankly, if you can get that spread more through the country, it would actually prevent some of the consumer disasters and other problems that some of the clients that we have really face. So why do you care about legal services, access to justice? And if you are able to sneak in something about financial literacy, we would be delighted.
Well, thank you. I'll try to do both. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It starts with how I got started with this, and John knows this. My mom graduated from the University of Chicago Law School in 1946, and her first job was with the Legal Aid Bureau of Chicago. And she would often, as I was growing up, talk about the importance of legal aid and how important it was to give back. At the same time, my grandfather, my mom's dad, was a lawyer, and my mom would also tell the story about how her grandfather, C.F. Stratford, owned a hotel in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that was burned down during the famous riots in the 20s. And my great-grandfather escaped from Tulsa, and they were trying to extradite him back. And it was a real risk if he came back to Tulsa that he'd be lynched in that time. And my grandfather, again, being a lawyer, was able to protect his father and actually save his life. And so my mom would always talk about the reason she became a lawyer was because she was able to see her dad save her grandfather's life. So that's kind of, I think why John thought about me for this. And his father was at the U of C at the same time that my parents were there. The second thing, you were nice to ask about financial literacy. My father was the class of '48 at the U of C Law School and was a Tuskegee Airman and a fighter pilot in World War II. And he started buying stocks for me as a young person, age 12, instead of birthday presents and Christmas presents. He thought it was important for me to learn about the markets. So what we've tried to do at Ariel is that we've done a couple things. We started a small public school 20 years ago with Arnie Duncan when he worked at Ariel to give kids real investments. The 600 kids there get, a great financial literacy curriculum. They also have a chance to invest in real stocks with real money. And we do things like take them to the McDonald's annual meeting every year where I'm a board member, bring them down and have a chance to talk to our analysts about careers in financial services. And we also have another program that's affiliated with the Big Shoulders Fund in Chicago, where we have now 50 different Catholic and public schools have a financial literacy program where they partner with various financial institutions around Chicago. So the reason I bring that up, I think that one of the great things about that is that the kids learn about having trust in our financial systems. They learn about our capitalist democracy. They think about career paths in financial services, and again, build this trust. So I think one of the things I think would be great is if we could find ways for more and more law firms to partner with urban public schools and have the role models of lawyers there in the public schools talking about legal careers, learning about, again, our capitalist democracy and how it works in the three branches of government and all the things that would hopefully develop more trust in all of our systems, and maybe it would help to create a kind of environment that was more positive. Finally, as you know, in Chicago, we're all so under stress because of the lack of trust in our police and in our justice system. And so I think if we can have lawyers there building relationships with inner city kids, maybe there would be that more higher levels of trust and a better outcome for all of our communities. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Arnie Sorensen, President and CEO of Marriott International, which if you didn't know, although I am a customer, has lodging in 85 countries and territories. Leader in sustainability, diversity, public policy. Why are you here? Why do you care about this? Why does it matter?
Well, maybe just to prove that I'm not an entirely reformed lawyer, I'll pick an argument where one doesn't exist, which is, I guess, what lawyers like to do, right? So I want to talk a little bit about why self-interest is actually an important motivating factor here, not because I disagree with any of the words that have been said. And in fact, it's really special when self-interest drives you to a place which is also satisfying from a social perspective and from a personal perspective, which access to justice is certainly one of those areas. Marriott's been in business for about 90 years. The founders started with a 9-stool root beer stand about 2 miles away from here, A&W root beer stand. And famously, when the first cold weather came, they added chili dogs to the menu, and it became the Hot Shops. But from the beginning, what they said was take care of the associate, and the associate will take care of the customer, and the customer will come back again and again. We today are no longer really in the restaurant business unless restaurants are in hotels, but we have about 350,000 people around the world who wear our name badge every day. And they range from brand new employees who've never had jobs before to new immigrants to very successful managers. And we depend on them to deliver the experience we need to deliver to our customers. Think about that and think about the work that J.P. Morgan has done recently to assess how many of us are ready for a crisis in our lives financially. And this is not just a question about the working poor. This is essentially the vast majority of working people and middle-class people who really do not have the resources to deal with an unexpected event, whether that be a legal event or some other event. Those are the events that derail people. Obviously, the fewer resources anyone has, the easier it is to be derailed. You can be derailed by one of your kids being nabbed and thrown in jail, by a divorce, by a drug issue, by an issue with a landlord, by an immigration issue, maybe for a family member, by a death in the family, certainly by a health issue. All of these things can be career-threatening, and obviously, from our perspective, cause us not maybe just to lose an associate, but have that associate totally distracted from their work. And so we have for years said, how do we make sure we're doing what we can? Of course, that's satisfying. And it's something that by itself we take enormous pride in saying, look at the way that life has been transformed. But it also is essential that it be in our self-interest, because it's in our self-interest, we can build programs where all of our associates can access, we call it resources for life. It includes legal resources, but also financial resources and healthcare resources, where they can go and get a free legal service consultation to figure out, do I need a lawyer? Obviously, we're not going to set up our own law firm, and we wouldn't have the expertise nor the efficiency to do that well. But we can provide services to people so that they can say, this problem has just arisen in my life. What should I do about it? Is this just a form? Can you get me a form? Is this a regulatory matter? Can you help me file a form with the government for disability benefits, for example, which we do through our healthcare provider too. But that ends up helping them through it, and it helps us too, because it causes our people to be, of course, more loyal to us, but even more important than that, much more engaged in the work that they've got to do and take pride in the growth of their careers, as opposed to being unable to come to work or thinking every day, all day long while they're at work about the crisis which is consuming their lives.
Well, thank you, and it's such a good reminder that legal needs are like health needs. They're essential for people being able to lead their lives, just ordinarily, so thank you. Deborah Cafaro is identified by the Harvard Business Review as one of the 50 best-performing CEOs in America. She is the chair of Ventus, Inc., which is a S&P 500 company with over 1,300 healthcare and senior living properties. She is on the board of the University of Chicago. And she is a leader in corporate governance and philanthropy, and she's going to get the question, why do you care? Why are you here?
Thanks, Dean Minow. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm a bit new to this, so I hope you'll forgive me. I will say that I'm really happy to talk with you. They did not call on us at the university. They didn't tell us they were going to call on us at the University of Chicago.
Call. It's not a cold
exactly.
Call. It's a warm
so
call.
It was always we had to be on our tiptoes. Anyway, I grew up as a working class kid in Pittsburgh, and I think I understood from a very early age how important it is that people get a fair shake. And I think that when I was growing up, it was easier to get a fair shake than it is today. And I do think getting a fair shake, an important component of that is access to justice. And so what you do at Legal Services really enables, I think, more people to feel like they have a fair shake, which enables, of course, our democracy to function and for people to have trust in the system. I would say what I see in my business as a large owner of senior living and healthcare assets is a huge number of seniors and veterans who would be entitled to many benefits and services and the ability to access both the healthcare system and other kinds of benefits, who are completely unable to do so because they don't have anyone to help them navigate through the system. And the last thing I would say is, as a parent, I have a disabled daughter, and she's developmentally disabled, and I see a lot of her peers who are indigent and who don't have the resources that our family does. And those families are utterly bereft in terms of being able to find educational solutions, being able to access, again, benefits and navigate the healthcare system. And obviously, it is the right thing to do to provide resources to that community, to enable them to have a full life and be citizens. And that's obviously also great for our democracy and great for our economy, be able to hold jobs and be productive members of society. So that's why I'm here today, in addition to Mr. Levy.
Thank you, and I'm so glad that you are, and those are wonderful points. Brad Smith, president of Microsoft, leader around the country. You've been described as the de facto ambassador for the tech industry at large, says the New York Times. Civic leader, Kids in Need of Defense, chairing the Leadership Council of Legal Diversity. I have been told that you were the first attorney at Covington and Burling who made it a condition of joining, taking a job there, that you had a PC on your desk. Is that true?
That is true.
And Brad Smith, you are a real hero of mine. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, I also want to say I have twice visited the University of Chicago, and I enjoyed it both times. So I feel very comfortable with all of you. Rather than echo the very good words that I think so many people have offered about why business cares, I think another interesting question to think about is, why should anyone else care about whether business cares about this issue? And I think people should. Because at bottom, what we're talking about is a legal challenge that I think is fundamentally an economic problem. There is a mismatch between supply and demand of legal services on a persistent basis for a very important part of the population. It is a gap that the free market will not close. People don't have the money to buy these services. It is a gap that, at least in its entirety, government support will not close. So how will we close this gap? And I think in addition to everything else, it really calls for an innovation imperative. I think it calls for legal innovation, but also business process, business model, and technology innovation. Just think about the examples we've heard about this afternoon. When you allow someone of low income to file an affidavit in lieu of paying a fine, that represents legal innovation that actually changes the curve of demand for additional legal services. When you take training and you automate it, you take a part of the legal process that a business person would say is a business process, and then you use technology innovation to reduce the cost and, frankly, reduce the barrier to entry. A lot of what we've done with Kids in Need of Defense is try to innovate around the business model to create a new public-private partnership that involves some government financial support, a model built around people who are permanent, in effect, legal aid employees with lots of volunteers. At this point, 329 law firms, companies, law schools, and bar associations. And when I look at the future, at where technology is going, when I listen to Mark and think about Pro Bono Net, the great untapped opportunity for the next 2 decades, frankly, is around technology. Whether it's around taking other processes like translation. So many people speak different languages, and yet I know with our Skype translator, we could have an English-speaking lawyer speak with a Spanish-speaking client. Or you take that intake example that Jim was describing and how that has been automated, and when I think about where machine learning is going to go and natural language interfaces, none of this is a panacea, but we can do so much more. And I think it fundamentally brings me to the last thing I think a lot about, which you heard about a moment ago. Why is it as lawyers that we are so generous, and yet I think we quite rightly feel underappreciated? I think part of the answer is this. As lawyers, we spend a lot of our time talking to other lawyers. We need to spend more of our time talking to people who are not lawyers. We need to spend more of our time listening to and learning from people who are not lawyers. And more than anything else, we need to enlist people who are not lawyers in helping us surmount this fundamental legal challenge.
So powerfully said. You know, if Arnie figured out that lawyers can create an argument when there isn't one, And Brad reframed the question to answer a better one. I would just say that we had one more question, which I've been told we don't have time to address, but you began to address, Brad, and I guess I would leave this as the ask to everybody. How can we who care about this issue, which you have demonstrated so powerfully, better connect with people who can help solve the issue, which I think will be people outside of the way lawyers think about how you do it? Because lawyers actually have come up with business models that are not working, and with court systems that charge fees that put poor people in a death spiral. And we need to talk with other people. And I actually think that the people who are here represent the kind of talent and knowledge and innovation that would make a big difference. And I know many of you are already collaborating with people on technology, on business systems. And it does require some humility that we will not solve this problem without collaborating with other people. With apologies to our amazing panel for not getting to the rest of our questions. We do thank the Vice President for his appearance, but he took our time. But I'm going to ask everyone to join me in thanking our panel. I'm going to ask Brad Smith to save 1 minute. Everybody, please.